Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of The Growth Show. I'm joined with David and Tom today. And today we're going to be discussing when to say no. As a leader, when do you have to say no? Lots of pressures on leaders to agree with people, move forward. But when are the times you step back and just say no? So David, nice general question as well to stump you with, but what's your thoughts?
Yeah, great question, with no context. No, I think I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I'm still not entirely sure. But here's my gut reaction anyway. I would say that if you've got to say no to your management or those higher up the chain to you, you've probably got a far bigger problem in the business. There's probably been a far bigger breakdown in communication, or there isn't an alignment on the outcome you're trying to achieve, or something like that. I think if it's getting to the point where you've got to say a flat out no, I'm just not doing that, without the context of, say, it being unethical or something like that. If it's just a general business strategy that you're saying, I don't agree with that, I think there's probably a far bigger problem somewhere else in the chain that has somehow led you to this point. Now, I'm a bit of an affiliator at heart, so I don't think I'd ever would outrageously just say no straight up to somebody. I know plenty of people do, and it works really well for them. And I know plenty of people who stormed into the senior partner's office and said, no, not happening, and here's why, and they get their way. But that's not for everybody. My thing would be, if you want to sort of, great Andrew Carnegie style, how to win friends and influence people, I would ask questions. And I would, if you see the problem where this is going and you see that there's not going to get to the outcome that anybody wants, I would just ask loads of questions around it. I get a meeting and just say, look, I don't think I'm entirely clear on why we're doing this. Can I just ask a few questions and see if we can get to a better outcome, hopefully for everybody? And then I'm completely aligned and completely on board. And even then use that time to sort of pace and lead to show your side of things or a differing view of what might be there. But that might be a different way to kind of do it if you don't want to go to the straight no and press the nuclear button.
Perfect. I mean, that makes sense. Tom, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, no's oddly enough quite familiar territory for me, Nick, because I think from my experience, as a turnaround or someone with turnaround expertise, I do other things as well, but it's the ability to see around corners. And so I think some trajectories are quite clear from my experience. Whilst it's a hypothesis, it's actually going to lead to an unfavourable outcome or not to deliver a successful outcome. And so I think you need a bit of a bizarre combination of a lot of business experience as well as experience in psychology as well to actually identify these situations. I think the healthiest sign in terms of the initial engagement, I think it starts with initial discussion with, whenever that initial discussion starts, and it's sort of when the client says they don't know. I think that's the healthiest time. It's the healthiest place to be. And I think there's a few different perspectives just like to share on this. There's one as a sort of CEO, there's one as a fixer, there's one as an employee, there's one as strategically, and there's one sort of emotionally. If I just try and touch these, I think first of all, in terms of engagement, we've actually just been talking about this. I think it's about, what's the outcome? Do you agree with the outcome? Are you aligned on the outcome? Will you let me do the job? And I do actually want to do anything different. Those are the three checks, because if you bring somebody in and they don't want to do anything different, it's going to sort of end up in tears. And so I try and identify that sort of thing up front. I think there are also situations where the strategy is obviously not going to work. Or there's inaction. I have also found whilst leaders say all the right things up front, there's inaction. You reach a point of inaction, and sometimes that can't be resolved, or sometimes they wish not to resolve the issue, which is fine. So whilst with the best skills in the world, actually you can reach that situation. I think from a CEO's perspective, I think there's a few banana skins coming out the new now, which are important to recognise. The first one is shortcuts to making money. So there's a lot of flimmy discussion around Bitcoin valuations at the moment, and I think it's important as well from a business perspective, and those sort of shortcuts taken, and there's a real case for critical thinking rather than shortcuts. The second thing I think is to increase profit. Don't give stuff away. That's another no situation. So very tempting to give stuff away. In fact, exactly the opposite. We need to put pricing up. And I think the other thing is not to automate things. It's vitally important CEOs actually create jobs at all levels. And there's a lot of stuff around, the new economy and tech. It's absolutely complete nonsense. There's at the moment we need roles at all levels in organisations. I think the other thing is women in governance as well, which is a sort of yes, and these are all sort of. So I think women in governance, it's a sort of no, because no one really talks about the difference between men and women, but women tend to be statistically less risk or more risk adverse than men, and the balance. I mean, it's just common sense. We should talk about this. And actually, another no is diversity is not down to the colour of your skin; it's down to the, your personality or your character, which is John Luther King's sort of thing. So I think the very last thing on this particular thing, I think, is about increasing well-being and reducing online. So be careful about this. So Boris Johnson just recently congratulated ASOS in creating 2,000 new jobs, which is all very well, but this is driven by online addiction and driving consumption, which is the antithesis of what we should be doing, not to mention the broader implications of the retail industry. So I think, Nick, that's what I'd like to kick off with in terms of some thoughts there. I've got some more, but I'll hold my bacon for a little while.
Perfect. Quite a lot to unpack there, but I'll try and break down through bits there. So David, your first point there was around there's been a miscommunication gap if someone is coming to you saying can we do X, and you potentially missed a trick by them having a clear framework in which to know that that's not possible. That's what you were sort of hinting at towards there.
Yeah, or just if you can see that a strategy from the top is just not going to lead to the outcome that you want through experience, through seeing a market shift, talking to clients, talking to whatever, and you've got a very disconnected leader or management team above you that just aren't listening to what's going on in the market, and they're just sort of blindly keeping on doing what's already happening, then that is going to lead to a problem. But that is a far bigger problem than just saying no to them. That needs a real shift in thinking as to an engagement as to what's actually going on. And getting the no might get attention. It's then what you do with that and how you then get it to a more positive outcome of actually what you're trying to achieve. There's lots of people who are very happy, just saying no because they don't want to do something. But then, what's your outcome of doing it? I think that would be the key thing that I would drive back to. And how do you then get people to listen to then make, to then reevaluate their thinking that could then become more realigned with what you're actually trying to achieve?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does perfectly so. And Tom, I thought your point was good on it. It depends on the layers and levels of people, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things I guess leaders can help with is a lot of leaders are trying to create very autonomous environments for people to work within. But they do need to do a bit of a deep dive to make sure that people aren't wasting their time, right? And I think coming back to David's point on getting clear on what their outcome is, I do personally think there's a time when leaders can come in and say, look, this bit you're focusing on to try and get this outcome, I know doesn't work, saving time. But it's a bit of a conflict from leaders trying to be autonomous. So what advice would you have for someone who's trying to lead, autonomous life, trying to empower people in what they're doing, but maybe not delving deep enough into actually understanding, when they know what works and what doesn't work, how do you sort of part that onto people?
Yeah, just pick up on David just said. I mean, my no comes after a lot of discussion, a lot of question asking with the senior management team, and I'm quite happy to say no after that discussion if I really think it's not going to work, Nick, because my professional integrity is on the line. If I whilst it can lead to lucrative income for me potentially, I'm just not willing to do it. So I think that said, though, so to answer your question, at senior management level, there has to be a certain degree of difficult discussion had because they frankly can cope with it, and that's what they get paid for. After that, you then got a situation which I described as the jazz band, where you've got execution, Nick. And actually, I realised quite early on that I do not have the I don't have the whilst a lot of experience of all kinds of awful and great situations. I don't have the magic wand, and nor do I know all the detail, and nor do I want to know all the detail. And so, at that point, what I do is I create a structure. Well, I create a structure that provides the flexibility to let people implement stuff in their own way, and then I have a way of bringing them back into a review, as a team, to check the quality of their decisions to make sure it's on track. But at no time do I tell people what to do. What I do having had the discussion with the senior management team, or even obviously being a senior manager myself, will then ask questions, steer, switch between director, coach and mentor as required to steer the thing in the right direction. So I think it's so important not to tell people what to do and assume that you know the answers. So I think but I think there's also some triggers in there where some big important things at the moment around which just show no critical thinking. So the discussion around Bitcoin, for example, people sort of jump on the bandwagon. I've studied it for about 4 or 5 years in incredible depth. I'm not saying I'm the expert, but if I'm not comfortable with the nature of the discussion, I will challenge it, and it requires real courage. I think the challenge as well at lower levels in the organisation is that people talk about diversity, but actually, are we willing to listen to different opinions, which we've talked about before? Because that actually is the engine. That's the tail wagging the dog. That's actually what keeps the ship in line. This is the nature of the jazz band, which enables you to hit the right target. And I think that the tragedy in this, Nick, in reality, is if you just think about the way some dialogue, particularly when difficult things are reached, and you've only got to look at the dialogue around Trump or Biden or a whole raft of what happens is there's no effort to take a real interest in what someone's saying. It goes straight to a label, and Tom is like bang. So I'm clearly quite a bold type of individual. I've developed a particular set of skills, notwithstanding I changed my style. But I think the danger with this is the assumption that somehow people are flexible and can say what they want to say, when in fact they actually can't, Nick. And we've created a tyranny of tolerance. And actually, by speaking up, you can get shot down and never recover. And there's lots of tragically examples of that. And I think if you just think about that, then I'm passionate about new action. If you think about that, not listening to people and not being challenged by the people around you, allowing them to steer the ship, where is the new action in that, Nick? How actually is that going to steer the ship? And there's more chance probably of actually that taking the business off course if you're actually not listening and taking on board different opinions, because that's really where the engine is. And I've as a senior manager, I know what does good look like. It means that I'm not around, and it's actually what happens when I'm not in the business. So it's not about my interaction with people, it's about how the rest of the team interact with each other. And I'm just simply a conduit just to get this environment right, Nick. And so that's always been my view. Whereas a lot of people, I think great leaders have to be around. They don't. Great leadership is what happens when you're not there.
Yeah, great leadership is creating more great leaders, I always thought. So I mean, on one of the points there, I would love to have the Bitcoin debate at some point. Like I know quite a few people making it their treasury, and a few of my friends have been advising governments on how they tokenize their currency. So I could definitely get some interesting people on here to thrash that out, which would be good. Yeah. Coming back to this, so I just piqued my interest a lot there. So David, there are a lot of people who, coming to some Tom points there, there's a lot of people who are in very process-led jobs, right? And they might be fairly point and shoot drivers of people. Maybe a better way, maybe more than managers, like drivers of people, making sure people are doing that process job there. Is a better approach for them just to educate them on why they believe that process works, rather than such a prescriptive, like do X, Y, Z?
In terms of, is it on the onus of the manager to then explain to the employee why this process is the process that we're doing?
Yeah,
Or-
well, a few, what we see is sometimes managers don't. They just get staff and say, you've got to do X, you do Y, and Z pops out, right? And have you done X? Brilliant. Have you done Y? Great. And there's this person at the receiving end who might be getting great results, but actually maybe there's not that understanding of why there's no challenge going on.
I think that is a really important thing in a process, led environment like that. I think that is really important. I think the engagement on that piece then has to be done really, really well. So if you look at, here's a very sweeping statement, but if you look at kind of, Japanese companies that are highly structured in how they work traditionally, but they have a lot of processes in place for continual feedback and continual improvement and things like that. So it's a very structured process, but within that, there's scope for huge scope for engagement. I think where you're going to lose people is if you go, this is the one way and the only way we do it. Many years ago, I had a breakfast with a chairman of one of the biggest charities in the UK. And he said, Dave, could you do me a favour? And I said, I'll do anything for you. What would you like me to do? And he goes, could you never work for somebody? And I said, happily. Why? And he said, you would be the biggest nightmare employee. You would look at all the problems in the business and you would solve all the other things except for actually doing your day job. Because you just have a brain that's not wired to do that. And I said, thank you so much for your feedback. That is incredibly helpful. And it has been incredibly helpful. It's something I remind him of. But so the flip side of it is there are just some people who aren't process people. My brother is an accountant. He is a process person. He is brilliant. The last person you'd ever want in the world doing your accounts would be me. And he'd be a brilliant person. And we're just wired, our brains are slightly wired. If someone says to me, this is the way we do it, my instant reaction is to go, I bet we can find a better way or a more efficient way or a cost-saving way or a more profitable way or whatever it is. That's just how my brain kind of works. So I think if you're finding that really frustrating, if you're in a system that is not stimulating and you keep finding yourself pushing water up a hill by coming up with ideas of how things could be improved and it's falling on deaf ears and nothing's happening, you're probably in the wrong system for you. You're in the wrong environment. And I fully understand that you don't want those kind of people necessarily in nuclear plants thinking of new ways to do things the entire time. That might not be the best place for them. But you've got to look at you in the mirror and go, am I in the right place for me? Am I in an environment that's bringing the best out of me and playing to my skills? And if not, you might want to have a dust off the old CV and think about what you're doing. Because if that environment just isn't going to change.
Yeah. And I think if you're one of those leaders who can't easily articulate the why a process exists, then I think it's time to step back and get back engaged with the business you're in, right? Because there's zero challenge going on there. And if you can't do that why, so someone can make up their own opinions to either come on that path with you, you're on a losing battle, really, and you've killed any kind of creativity, right? Into that. Tom, any sort of closing thoughts on this, on times you've experienced where no is just essential?
Yeah, I'm just no is essential. I could maybe come back to that. Just to break the rules as usual. So just a couple of points on what David just said. I think if you talk about process, oddly enough, I was a process engineer when I started my career, but I've always been a big process person. Actually delivering difficult things, you need to have be able to organise the jigsaw really. I think that said, in terms of process, specifically when I've done work in banks, I did some work with the high street banking just before the banking crisis around risk, interesting enough. I identified that 80% of the process was completely nonsensical and a waste of time, yet people were still doing it, Nick. The worry was that no one wasn't putting their hand up and saying, look, this is stupid. And that's actually very high risk when people are not putting up their hand up and saying that this is stupid. So, and regardless of a nuclear plant or whatever, actually, you want people who put that, particularly in a nuclear plant, to put their hand up and say, look, this is stupid. The second thing, I think, Bitcoin type discussion, absolutely, Nick. It's important to sort of make sure that we are critically thinking everything. And as leaders, we're not sort of casting things as in stone. So I think that's a really welcome discussion. I think there are some concerns which we can talk about with that. I think the other thing, which is talk about process, I think it's about distinguishing between the how and the what. So I'm always as clear as I can be in terms of what I'd like people to do, but not on the how. And that's where the money is, which provides a space for people to do their own thing, create their own little process, which quite frankly, if it's on the back of a fag packet, excellent, don't care at all. As long as they report, they've got a way of reporting back. I think the other thing is David was talking about broad thinkers. I think there's a different angle on that, which I just add, which is enterprise thinkers. So people who actually care beyond their own scope of responsibility versus, if I asked, if we're all tasked with delivering our own job and we could see another part of the organisation needed resource more than ours, would we give that part of the organisation resource? That's my natural modus operandi personally. Notwithstanding, and I won't let my own thing fall to pieces either. So I think there is an element. And the other thing I'd just say in regards to process is, and this goes back to a lot of very hard experiences, without some sort of process, you actually can't improve anything. The reason for that is that you don't know what part of the process broke, and so therefore you can't fix it. So to assume that you can operate without process is simply nonsensical, and that's regardless of business. Your recruitment business, Nick, or particularly the manufacturing environment. But every business has to have a process, because if something goes wrong, you simply can't fix it. And I can give you 1,000 different examples of that.
Yeah, I think they're great points. I think also some people sometimes mix up autonomy and accountability. Seems to get lost the wayside. Yeah. I've had an experience before when someone was crying for autonomy in their business, and they were really treated like a child.
Yeah,
and we really focused on the autonomy piece for them. And actually, what we didn't focus on so much was the framework to work within, and the amount of autonomy we gave them was frankly overwhelming for them. It was just such a change. We didn't actually realise there's probably their version of autonomy right now is probably an eighth of someone else's version of autonomy. And giving them that framework, playing field, and knowing what the rules of the playing field were absolutely critical. And it was a really good learn. We're just trying to be just good to this person, but actually we weren't doing them a service. Or
you have to be very careful with that.
Like we're trying to make them happy, rather than actually going like, how do you improve in the right conditions, right? And how do we set that framework for you? And vital lesson there. Guys, again, thank you. I love these general questions with no context that you guys have to pick apart at, and congratulations how you managed to do it every week. Thanks to everyone at home. We love doing these. It's great fun. Thank you for all your questions, making us sweat trying to figure out how to answer this stuff. It's great fun. Thanks to everyone who's recently joined us on the Spotify channel. It's been great to see, and nearly 6,000 people on YouTube. Thank you, whoever you are. It's great. We'll keep on doing these. Keep trying to add as much value as we can to you guys. Have a great. Hope you have a great start to the year, and we will speak with you all soon. All the best. Goodbye.